Hey, welcome back, my static-charged moths circling the flickering screen light, my under-caffeinated prophets of the checkout lane, my federally ignored citizens of the shrugging republic. Hobo Yeti here, still mildly radioactive, still emotionally unsupervised, still legally allergic to anything labeled inspirational. And today, we're not climbing out of the pit. No, we're pulling up a chair and staring into it, real slow-like, until the pit stares back and asks if you've got a Netflix login. This one's about apathy. American-grade, industrial-strength apathy. The kind that doesn't just settle in your bones, but nestles under your skin like a microchip made of dust. It's the silence after the last eviction notice, the buzz in your ears, when the news anchor smiles about GDP while your fridge hums like a dying prayer. We live in a country where nothing changes until it does and somehow gets worse. Now I'm not here to preach. Lord knows I'm not an optimist, and if I were a therapist, I'd have been fired from community college group therapy for quoting doom metal and prescribing soup behind a laundromat. But I am here to talk about this slow, rotting fog we've all been wading through, where the days blur, the headlines echo, and we stop asking questions, not because we don't care, but because it hurts more to pretend that caring would help. We used to dream big, remember? White picket fences, weekends off, pensions, the occasional protest march that actually frightened someone in a suit. Now we're just trying to figure out which bill won't overdraft the account. You get up, you swipe your card, you nod politely at the security guard who's just a heartbeat away from being you, and then you go home and scroll through someone else's curated happiness like it's a museum exhibit from a life you never got to audition for. And that's just it. This numbness, it's not apathy by nature, it's apathy by design. See, once upon a time, they needed us to believe we mattered. To vote, to buy, to work, to produce, to enlist. But somewhere between Reaganomics and Reddit, they realized something much darker. We're more manageable when we're disconnected, not angry, not revolutionary, just tired. So tired that we start confusing survival with complicity. We are not passive because we don't care. We're passive because we cared for too long without seeing a damn thing change. Do you remember your first political heartbreak? Maybe it was the Patriot Act or Citizens United or watching your vote disappear like vapor in a redistricted county. Maybe it was watching the rich crash the world economy in 2008, then get bailed out while your cousin lost his house and your mom started skipping meals. Maybe it was realizing the media is more invested in pharmaceutical stocks than truth. Maybe it was your first taste of being treated like a criminal just for being poor, brown, queer, unhoused, or uninsured. Whatever it was, it changed you. And it should have. That's the moment you stopped being a dreamer and started being a casualty. The machine doesn't want cogs anymore. Cogs require maintenance. Cogs ask questions. No. What they want now is frictionless data. Clicks, trends, voting patterns, brand loyalty. If you die quietly with Amazon Prime and no known political affiliations, you are the perfect citizen. We were raised to think we were part of the story, that if we just played the game right, if we worked hard, kept clean, stayed civil, we'd eventually get invited to the table. But the table was always in a locked room, and the only thing we were ever meant to be was the furniture that made the room look lived in. We live in a world that makes you feel guilty for resting and ashamed for resisting. Try calling out the system and watch the responses pour in. Just work harder. Pull yourself up. You're just lazy. You're making excuses. All said by people one pink, slip away from joining you in the unemployment line. All clinging to the lie that their suffering makes them righteous and your suffering makes you disposable. So you stop talking, you stop trying, you stop hoping. And that silence, that's what they wanted all along. Because when you don't speak up, they don't have to listen. When you don't vote, they don't have to lie. When you don't fight back, they don't have to pretend they're losing. And when you stop believing you matter, they can keep doing whatever they want because nobody's watching and the house always wins. There's a term for this in trauma psychology, learned helplessness. It's what happens when you've been shocked so many times that even when the door's unlocked, you don't try to leave. You've internalized the cage. You've made peace with the floor. You've decided that existing quietly is better than risking another jolt. And that's where we are as a people, as a country. We have been jolted, shocked, betrayed, misled, surveilled, commodified, and bled dry until the very idea of resistance feels quaint, until slogans feel hollow and hashtags feel like memorials, until showing up feels like screaming into a hurricane of indifference. And the worst part is we gaslight ourselves. We call it being realistic. We say, what's the point? Now we say, it's just how the world works. But we say, nothing ever changes. But that's not realism. That's surrender. And it's not your fault you feel this way. The system is engineered to wear you down, to replace your rage with resignation, to make you think your silence is a virtue and your absence is peace. But here's the kicker, and it's going to sound a little nuts. But what if that quiet voice in the back of your skull that still gets angry when you see injustice? The one that twitches when they bulldoze a camp or cut school lunches or pass some new law criminalizing poverty. What if that voice isn't broken? What if it's the part of you that survived? Because apathy isn't the absence of feeling, it's the overload of it, the dam finally cracking under the weight of constant loss, betrayal, and disappointment. You didn't stop caring. You just couldn't carry the pain anymore without setting it down for a while. But you know what they never count on? They never count on us picking it back up. There was a time, not even that long ago, when people still believed in things. Churches were full, not because everyone agreed, but because the ritual felt like a contract with the divine. Politicians had to lie better because the public still gave a damn. Workplaces promised pensions. Teachers were respected. Newspapers hit the doorstep with the weight of accountability. And somewhere in the soft center of that illusion, we believed we were building something. And then something cracked. Not all at once. It was slow. Like a foundation rotting beneath a house no one wants to admit is sinking. It started with layoffs and ended with entire towns gutted for scrap. It started with praise music and ended with mega churches that sold bottled water and crypto advice. It started with C-SPAN debates and ended with billionaires shit-posting their way into office. Somewhere between Reaganomics and Reddit, the scaffolding came down, not with fire, but with fatigue. Religion became branding, and politics became performance. Labor became a liability, and the American dream, that became content. Now, I know some of you are thinking, yeah, but come on, it's not all bad. Sure, some community still exists. Some pastors still mean it. Some teachers still fight. Some city council meetings still matter. But you can't build meaning in a system that sees your soul as a resource. We were taught to mine ourselves for value, to become products in a market of attention, to turn our real lives into thumbnails and trauma reels just to stay visible. And when that failed, we blamed ourselves. Let me say it plain. You are not the failure. The system is. And it's not broken. It was built like this. After I posted that video breaking down Trump's executive order on homelessness, I expected horror. What I didn't expect was how many people just sighed, shrugged, said, guess I better move, or, wow, that sucks. What can you do? It wasn't indifference. It was something deeper, like the part of them that might have once fought back had already gone dark. Because the fall of meaning doesn't leave a crater. It leaves a vacuum, and that vacuum gets filled with whatever's easiest. Distraction, narcissism, doom scrolling, cults, supplements, faux stoicism, passive nihilism wrapped in cute fonts, influencers telling you to drink more water while the entire world criminalizes your existence. Even spirituality feels like a luxury when your tent's leaking and your neighbor OD'd behind the Dollar Tree. We used to stand for things. Now we stand next to them. We observe, we critique, we share. But when the knife hits the bone, how many still show up? And even apathy is a response. Even silence is a signal. Even numbness is resistance waiting to remember its purpose. We're not apathetic because we don't care. We're apathetic because we've been told that caring is useless, that screaming doesn't change anything, that hope is naive. But if you feel that twitch in your gut when injustice walks by, if you still flinch at cruelty, still pause when you see someone disappear into poverty's shadow, then you're not gone. You're still here. And that twitch, that's the spark. There's a moment, not a loud one, but a kind of soft folding, where the soul stops reaching for light. It happens slowly, like rain inside the walls. You don't notice it until the ceiling sags, and by then you've already adapted to the mold. That's where we are now, comfortably numb, not dead, not outraged, just adjusted to violence we no longer name, adjusted to policies that would have sparked protests a generation ago, adjusted to hearing about another unhoused death in the cold and thinking, well, at least it wasn't me. And if you're wondering how that happened, how we went from marching to muting, from shouting to scrolling, it wasn't accidental. It was curated, market tested, scented with lavender, and timed with your algorithmic dopamine drip. The system didn't just beat us, it comforted us. It gave us just enough convenience to distract from collapse. It gave us anesthetics and called it peace. It gave us likes, followers, filters, so we could mistake being seen for being safe. And most importantly, it gave us noise, so much noise. Noise that wraps around your thoughts like cotton until all that's left is static and reaction. You can live your whole life now without ever having a real thought. You can be fed news, spirituality, rebellion, even grief, all sanitized, bite-sized, and ready to monetize. And if you ever try to unplug, try to feel again, you'll realize just how deep the anesthesia runs. Because underneath all that numbness is pain, real, sharp, unresolved pain. The pain of watching your dad's factory get replaced with fentanyl, the pain of losing your home and being told to feel grateful for a warming center. Pain should lead to action. But here, we branded emotion as illness. We started treating righteous anger like a diagnosis. We started numbing the symptoms of collapse instead of fixing the cause. You live in a nation where millions are one accident away from living in their car, and the solution is to gamify self-care, hydrate more, try intermittent fasting. Fasting? Bro, I'm broke. That's not a lifestyle, that's a consequence. But we play along, we sip herbal tea, we repeat affirmations, we keep our heads down, we meditate to tolerate the intolerable, because feeling it all would burn us alive. So we split. We split from our grief, we split from our rage, we split from each other. And once you've split that many times, all that's left is numbness, comfortable, marketable, deadening. Apathy isn't emptiness, it's pain with nowhere to go. It's compassion with its wings clipped. It's hope that's been mugged, kicked, and left for dead behind the Dollar Tree. But hope, is sneaky. It shows up again, it limps, it drags itself into the light, and sometimes it looks exactly like anger. They always call it the silent majority, don't they? Like it's some sleeping giant, noble and restrained, but that's a myth. The silent majority isn't silent, it's sedated, overworked, underpaid, flooded with noise, and numbed by design. People aren't quiet because they're fine with the system. They're quiet because they've been convinced they're not allowed to speak. It's not force that holds us down, it's fatigue. They don't need to censor you when they can distract you. They don't need to kill the revolution when they can monetize the merch. You're tired before the day starts, your heart races by noon, and by nightfall you scroll not because you want to, but because your brain can't carry any more weight. You're overloaded. You're grieving without knowing what you lost. And you think your silence is just survival, but sometimes it breaks. A strike that catches fire. A neighbor that refuses to let someone go hungry. A woman who feeds her block out of her Snap card. Those aren't accidents. They're ruptures, tiny defiant cracks in the narrative. And cracks don't need permission to spread. So, it doesn't take much to start a fire. A match, a strike, a breath. Sometimes it's just one voice that says, no more. Not shouted, not broadcast, just whispered with conviction, and that whisper moves through the bones of others like a secret they'd forgotten they knew. See, the spark isn't gone. It's buried under bills and heartbreak and propaganda, under fatigue, distraction, and the white noise of late-stage capitalism. But it's still there, in you, in us. And I know that sounds, a little Hallmark movie meets Molotov, but hear me out, because I've seen it. I've seen it in someone sharing their last cigarette with a stranger outside a shelter. I've seen it in a woman organizing a neighborhood fridge after losing her job. I've seen it in a man with nothing left but time offering to walk someone scared to go alone. These are not acts of apathy. These are sparks, quiet ones, but real. The truth is, you don't need to believe in the system to believe in each other. You don't need to trust the process to start your own. You don't need a title or a budget or a movement. You just need to decide that numb is not enough, because they win when you forget you have a soul, when you stop looking each other in the eye, when you start thinking that surviving is the same as living. Maybe surviving is the first rebellion. Maybe staying kind in a world engineered for cruelty is radical. Maybe looking out for each other is how we build the world they swore we'd never get. And I'm not talking about kumbaya or optimism porn or that tired meme about being the change you want to see. I'm talking about friction, the resistance of one body against the machine, the refusal to disappear. Because every time you help someone who's been discarded, every time you question what they told you was inevitable, every time you sit with your discomfort instead of numbing it, you're stoking the ember. And yeah, sometimes the spark doesn't light anything right away. Sometimes it smolders. Sometimes it flickers. Sometimes it dies out and comes back in someone else. That's okay. Sparks don't care about credit. They care about fire. And when enough of them catch, things change. Not all at once, not like the movies, but in the slow, stubborn way that weeds break concrete. So let's talk real. What can you actually do? Show up to a city council meeting. Local policy is where most damage begins, and where your voice is hardest to ignore. Be the unexpected person who says, "This is wrong." Help someone get ID. It's harder than you think, and more transformative than you'll ever know. Join a tenant union, or support one, or start whispering the idea of one in the halls of your building. Plug into mutual aid, not charity, not helping the less fortunate, mutual survival, mutual defiance. Write a letter, a real one. Ink on paper still hits harder than email spam. Interrupt lies in public, even just once, even with a question. A single voice saying, "Really?" can crack the spell. Plant something in the cracks, a sock bin, a list of resources, a goddamn dandelion. Refuse to leave the world as you found it. Support strikes, walk a picket, share a post, donate to strike funds. Union power is people power. Be the place someone can land, even for a minute, especially when the world won't catch them. Refuse to forget, not because it makes you noble, but because it makes you dangerous. These aren't world-saving acts, they're world-changing ones. And that's the kind you can actually do. You don't need a revolution. You just need to remember you're not alone, that your existence is not noise, that your action, however small, is still a no, a stubborn, beautiful, fire-starting no. They want you to forget you're human. That's the end game, isn't it? Strip you down to numbers. Convert your story into a data point. Call your anger instability, your grief a chemical imbalance, your suffering a statistic. You become the silent variable in someone else's quarterly report. The algorithm classifies you, the system shelves you, the policies erase you, and the culture shrugs and calls it fate. But hear me, and hear me well. You are not debris. You are not the byproduct of empire. You are not the leftover after someone else's dream. You are not broken glass in the streetlight glow. You are not disposable. You are not excess. You are not a burden. You are not the static between channels. You are the signal. You were born with thunder in your throat. You were made to disturb, to disrupt, to demand. And somewhere beneath the numbness, the sedation, the resignation, you still carry the code of defiance, because even in your silence there is language. Even in your stillness there is shape. Even in your pain there is proof. You're still alive. And maybe that's the most radical thing in a world built to kill spirit, to still be here, to still feel, to still want something better. Maybe the revolution doesn't start with fire. Maybe it starts with refusal. Refusal to accept that this is all there is. Refusal to surrender to systems that feed on your despair. Refusal to be gaslit into believing the world is fair. refusal to give your grief away for free. They told you change wasn't possible. They told you you're just one person. They told you the rich would always win. They told you your voice didn't matter. They lied. Not because they were afraid of you individually, but because they are terrified of what happens when people like you wake up at the same time. Because when the numb start to move, when the silent start to speak, when the broken start to build, the whole damn machine begins to crack, not from a riot, not from a war, but from a whisper that turns into a song, a rustling in the leaves, a shifting in the street, a kindness refused by no one, a pattern broken, a chair pulled up at the table by someone who was never invited but came anyway. You are not too late, you are not too small, you are not out of time. You are not alone. So no, this isn't the end of the story. This isn't your final form. This isn't the last thing you'll feel. This is the thaw. This is the inhale. This is the moment before the flame. Because the worst thing they ever did was convince you that you didn't matter. And the most powerful thing you can do is prove them wrong. Not by being loud, not by being perfect, but by simply refusing to disappear. And in that refusal, you plant a flag, you draw a line, you build something no algorithm can predict. You reclaim what they tried to steal, your meaning, your motion, your sacred stubborn humanity. You are not debris. You are the storm on the horizon. You are the fist in the pocket. You are the eye that still watches, and they don't know what to do with people like you. Not anymore. I hope your road is a good one, and if you're homeless, I hope it doesn't suck for you. Take care.